Hello and welcome to Firearm Freedom. This is going to be another Out of the Safe video. In today's Out of the Safe video, we are taking a look at my Ruger Mini-14. And before we get this video started, as always, I wanted to let you guys know how you can support everything that I do here on the Firearm Freedom channel. You can head down to that description and check out the links to the Firearm Freedom merchandise store. Anything you purchase on the merchandise store greatly supports everything that I do here on the channel. And if merchandise is not for you, then you can click on the link for the Subscribe Star account. There's not any extra content on the Subscribe Star account, but it gives you guys a way to donate even as little as $1 a month to the channel. And trust me, that support really helps me out. And if you're not looking to donate to the channel in any way, then you can just simply watch these videos. Make sure to comment down below. Let me know how you like the video or how I can improve on it for next time. And that really does help defeat the YouTube algorithms that are constantly pushing down gun content here on the platform. And above all else, you can hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. The premise of these videos is to go in the safes and try to find something that maybe I haven't shot in a very long time, or find something that has never made its way to the channel, but that has been in the collection for quite some time. This rifle was the first semi-automatic center-fired rifle that I ever purchased, way back when I was 18 years old. This rifle I purchased in New York. Unfortunately, the standard capacity 30-round magazines that you see here in front of you, which are perfectly fine and okay in the state of Pennsylvania, are not fine and not legal in the state of New York. So when I purchased this rifle, I originally shot it with 10-round magazines and even the 5-round magazines that came with the rifle from the factory. This particular Ruger Mini-14 is the ranch variation of the rifle. There are quite a few different sub-models of the Mini-14. They now come in threaded 300 blackout models. They come in tactical models that are also threaded with flash hiders. They also come with synthetic stocks. The ranch is going to have a standard blued finish, and it's also going to have a full-length wood stock. The wood on this stock is definitely nothing to write home about. It's your standard wood stock, and it's not super special. It gets the job done. And then also this particular rifle for me that I got many years ago now also came with a Picatinny Rail in the box. The Picatinny Rail just threaded right into these 3 additional screw slots on the top of the receiver, and this allows you to mount standard optics, whether that be magnified optics or something like this Primary Arms Micro Dot that you see me running here. First and foremost, with the Mini-14, I think this rifle holds such a special place in my heart because it is kind of like the shining star, if you will, in states that are incredibly ridiculous when it comes to unconstitutional gun control laws, like in the state of New York, where I'm from. In upstate New York, in order to have an AR-15, and in order for it to be compliant with the ridiculous laws of the state of New York, you have to make it incredibly neutered as a rifle. It has funky stock sets, it has funky pistol grips that aren't really pistol grips, or you can have a 10-round magazine permanently pinned and welded into the magazine well. This creates a bunch of issues for reloading. So although an AR-15 in a state like here in Pennsylvania is far more practical in almost every regard than this Mini-14, in states where you have far more restrictive gun control laws, if you would like to still shoot at a range and not have to worry about being arrested for what you are shooting, the Mini-14 is a great non-neutered rifle to go with. As it sits from the factory, especially in this ranch configuration, you have a standard non-pistol grip wood stock, and you also have a non-threaded barrel. So according to the state of New York, even though this is chambered in the same caliber as the AR-15, this is far less dangerous. So that allows you to actually own this rifle with no further modifications. You can buy the rifle from the factory, good to go, and shoot it as it was intended to be shot. Because of the lack of features, the shootability of the rifle definitely may not be as ergonomically friendly as the AR-15 variant or other semi-automatic variants that are out there. I think the most frustrating thing about the ranch model in particular is the length of pull, at least for me, on the stock. It's a little bit long and it has a little bit more of that traditional hunting rifle length of pull. This mixed with the larger rubber butt pad on the back that, in my opinion, is not really necessary for the rifle, and the fact that this rubber butt pad, which is larger, is also pointed in the bottom and a little bit more pointed in the top, this made it stick on quite a bit of gear. I would be running around at the range in a hoodie or something like that, and every time I went to shoulder the rifle, without a doubt, the hoodie or other piece of fabric on the shirt that I had on or plate carrier or whatever would get really caught up on this rubber butt pad. So I realized quickly that the rubber butt pad is definitely more annoying to have than not, and I'm sure you could probably get something on here that would shorten the length of pull a little bit and also get rid of that sticky rubber that's on the back. Also, because of the added length of pull, somebody with longer arms than I have would probably have no issues at all, but the longer length of pull for me made me get into a little bit more of a bladed stance, and to be honest with you guys, I actually felt like the length of pull on the Mini-14 is almost longer than its larger brother counterpart, the M1A. And obviously, if you couldn't already tell already, the Mini-14 is almost a shrunken down version of a couple of other rifles, and it has the same action that you are going to see in the M1 Carbine, that you're going to see in the M1 Garand, and also that you're going to see in the M1A. What Ruger essentially did here is they took that action that was still very highly regarded as a good tried and true method, even though in today's standards we can see some flaws with having a totally open action, and they put it into a 5.56 or 223 variation. For a very long time, police departments all over the country were utilizing the Mini-14 as a standard patrol rifle in their departments. So it definitely got quite a bit of tried and true testing in law enforcement departments all over the country. Now, the only other issue that I saw, aside from the stock and the length of pull, with shootability at the range was actually how controllable the rifle was. It was a little bit surprising. So when you are shooting this rifle, it's still 5.56 or 223, so the recoil is not punishing at all. But a mixture of having a non-threaded barrel, so just the standard crown on the end there and the front sight, and having a lot of the weight more towards the rear and not as much to hold onto, I found that with fast follow-up shots or trying to get a string of fire into a target of maybe 4 to 5 rounds, the front of the gun definitely moves a lot more than other rifles out there. And this shooting characteristic I have found is the exact same with the M1A and almost the exact same with the M1 Garand. However, the M1 Garand does have a full-length stock set that goes almost the full width of the barrel, and that really does help out tame a little bit of that front movement up on the end of the barrel. And with the M1A and the Mini-14 here, you don't really have that. So the controllability I have found with a mixture of the stock set and not having any sort of muzzle device in the front creates this pushing movement back, and not having as much to hold on to makes the gun definitely want to move almost in a circular, jumping around way more than something like an AR-15 or an AK variant or something like that. Now, after you get used to shooting the Mini-14 at the range, this is really not too terribly bad. And remember, just like the Ruger 1022, the stock options that are out there that you can get for these rifles is insane. You can get 6-position collapsible buttstock options. You can switch it out for a synthetic stock. You even have super cool options from Samson Manufacturing, which is like an AC 5.56 stock, which is a side folding stock that is super retro, super awesome. Now, the side folding stock from Samson, I would love to get at some point in the future for this rifle, but unfortunately, you're looking right around a 5 to 6 month back order on those stocks right now, and they're around $300. So because of that weight, that's just not something that's going to be in this rifle's future for quite some time. But whenever they come back in stock, I am definitely going to be thinking about one for this platform. Now, as far as reliability, I've only had one issue with this Mini-14. In its lifetime here in Pennsylvania, I've only fired 200 rounds for this video. That 200 rounds was all steel case. Some guns may not prefer steel case as much as others. and that was somewhat the case with the Mini-14. It ran all of that steel case 100% minus one stuck case that I got. That stuck case was after the gun was a little bit more dirty than when I started shooting it, and that was after it had been in a very rainy and cold range day, and that stuck case was one of the last magazines that I fired in the day, and it just got stuck in the chamber. I had to remove the mag and rack the op rod forward, bring it back really hard, and the stuck case came flying out. No other issues aside from that. So this will run steel case ammunition, but just be aware that as your chamber starts to heat up, and because of the way that the action is, you may or may not get a stuck case. That is always a risk when it comes to steel case expanding in the chamber. Now, when it comes to reliability, of course, we have to touch on the fact that the action, whether it be on this, the M1A, the M1 Garand, is completely open. Your bolt op rod, the channel that the op rod is riding in, and even this crevice back here where your whole fire control group is totally open for debris and other things in the environment to get into. This is not a good thing, especially if you're in a sandy or muddy environment. That is going to present kind of an issue. So in nice range conditions, or even in somewhat intense wet or humid range conditions, you're still going to be fine. But if you are in crazy adverse muddy conditions or sandy conditions, you will probably run into more issues than you would with another semi-automatic counterpart that's just a little bit more closed off to the elements. But at my range days that I've had, and even with the M1A and my M1 Garand, I have yet to have any major catastrophic malfunctions with this action. It tends to work really good. The one side note about any of these actions, they do prefer grease rather than oil. So when you are cleaning your Mini-14, which it does disassemble and clean exactly like its larger brother counterpart, the M1A, it will prefer grease, especially in areas like the channel that the op rod rides in here and around the locking lugs on the bolt. The really nice thing about the Mini-14s compared to the M1A is the fact that the heat shield actually covers the op rod. Now, an issue that can sometimes happen with the M1A is while you are gripping the rifle, which will be somewhat hard to show you on camera, your hand and fingers can kind of swing around and actually clamp on to where the op rod is reciprocating. And the issue with that is you can actually cause enough pressure to cause a malfunction in the gun. Now, Ruger actually addressed this problem with the heat shield, which is plastic, forming over the op rod itself. And what this does is as the op rod is moving back and forth, you can see it's totally shielded by this guard here. And you can grab this in any way you see fit. You can wrap your thumb over the top, you can have your hand right over the top of this, and it's not going to impede the functioning of your op rod. And that is going to be, in my opinion, a much more reliable way to have a heat shield covering over the tops of these rifles. Now, when it comes to magazines for the Mini-14, that is the one downfall that you're going to run into nowadays here in 2020 and 2021. Magazine availability is really tough for these rifles. And not only is it tough to find the magazines, it is also very expensive for these Ruger factory steel 30-round magazines. You can find 30-round, 20-round, and even 10, 5, and 50-round magazines. So there's a wide variety of different mags out there on the market. The Ruger magazines will be clearly marked on the base plate and on the side of the magazines. If you see a magazine like this one here that looks really, really similar, but there's no markings on it at all, it may be a Korean magazine or a Pro Mag. I'm actually not even sure what brand this magazine is. I would imagine it's a Pro Mag. It actually ran 100% reliably, but I found it in a random used bin and it works well, but I have no clue who the manufacturer is. And the sad, sad truth of why I was so depressed that Tapco went out of business was the Tapco Mini-14 mags. For the longest time, the reason why I love Tapco was not because of any of their goober-like stock sets, but because of these Mini-14 mags. These mags are super butt ugly, but they actually run 100% reliably. And the best part, they were only $14.99 and widely available. When Tapco went under and these magazines stopped being made, unfortunately, the only option really were the factory Ruger 30-round magazines or Pro Mag. And the factory Ruger mags can easily run you $40 a piece online when you can find them. Again, they're really tough to find, but they are good, reliable magazines. They are blued, so just be aware that when you're in adverse conditions, you may run into some issues with rusting. Just make sure to keep them well oiled. Now, aside from that, you can also find thermal magazines out there, but I've actually seen pretty rough reviews on those, and if you guys missed the M1A thermal magazine testing, you will know that I do not have any plans on buying the thermal magazines for my Mini-14 because if they're anything like the M1A mags, I would imagine they're not going to work too well. On top of this Picatinny Rail, I'm running a Primary Arms micro dot. This is a great little red dot, and it gets the red dot pretty low profile to the rifle itself. And I actually did not need any sort of a cheek riser or anything like that on the wood stock to run this red dot at the range. It is definitely a lot faster and a lot better with the issues and controllability that we talked about earlier to have this red dot on the top. The iron sights are great. You have a little ghost ring sight in the back and it lines up really nice and you can get an accurate sight picture. But with this red dot, it is far easier to get fast follow-up shots at the range. So this will definitely be staying. The one thing to be aware of, you have your brass ejecting out the side here. Now, I was a little bit nervous about reliability with that, with where this red dot is placed, but I actually had no issues with the ejection pattern, and you just want to be aware that if you have an optic that covers this whole part where it's cut out in the pick rail, you are probably going to run into some issues with extraction, so just watch what optic you're putting on the Picatinny Rail if you're going to go with an optic on your Mini. Now, the one thing with brass ejection is it flies, soars to the moon out of this gun. We were having a blast watching the brass literally helicopter spin like 45 feet to the right of the gun. That's great, it gets the brass out of there, but it's one thing that'll probably make you laugh at the range, and definitely something that if you're looking to reload your brass, you're probably going to have a hard time finding it out of this Mini. The sling that I'm running on the Mini-14 here is just a standard Vickers Blue Force gear sling. I have it attached to the sling swivel attachment on the front of the stock and also the one on the rear. A little bit more of a traditional way to mount a sling, so you're not going to be using it as you would a standard, more high-speed modern sling. At the range, I'm just running it with the sling floating down on the bottom of the rifle, and if I have to sling the rifle over my shoulder, I just sling it like I would normally. The safety and magazine release on the rifle is going to be exactly like the M1A. You are going to pull the safety towards the rear and push the safety forward in order to get the gun to fire. Obviously, by having to do that, your finger is in the trigger guard when you're taking the safety off. So it is important that if you are taking the safety off, you are absolutely ready to take a shot off, or you're doing it with your thumb and making sure your thumb is not in the way of the trigger at all. But obviously, this is a little bit more of a sketchy way to take the safety off. You just have to make sure that you're training properly at the range with this safety. With the way that you reload the Mini-14, you do have to rock the magazine in, very similar to any AK out there. And I actually perform reloads on this Mini-14 exactly like I would perform reloads on my AK. I come up with my extra magazine, release the old magazine with my thumb, come in with the new one, and come up under the rifle for the op rod to send it home. And I found that that method actually works incredibly well, and you can get really good with some fast reloads. Another huge plus that I realized about the Mini-14 quickly at the range was that all of these standard magazines will fit just fine in all of your magazine carriers for 5.56 AR-15 mags. This is a huge plus for all your kit at the range. Guys, that is pretty much going to wrap up this video on the Mini-14. If you have any questions about this rifle in particular or anything else on the channel, throw them down below in the comment section, and you guys know I absolutely will get back to you. While you're down there in the comment section, head up to the description and check out the links to the Firearm Freedom Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram account. I have daily content coming out on all three of those that you guys are not going to want to miss. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for more great videos to come soon.